Good morning. My name is John Hines. I'm a Tacoma City Council member here in District 1, which is the west end and north end of the city of Tacoma. And I'm running for re-election here this year, and we are about to get on the Route 1, which is the major bus route that goes through District 1. I mean, that's a great question. I think when I talk to a lot of my constituents here in Tacoma, the thing I hear a lot about is kind of safe ways to get about the district. So whether that's crosswalks, whether that's protected bike lanes, whether that's bike lanes in general. I hear a lot about ADA and sidewalks to nowhere, or broken and busted sidewalks. So I think a lot of it's just infrastructure improvements around kind of mobility. Like, how do we get people to move around our city or this district if they're not in a vehicle, right? And not only just be able to move, but move safely. Yeah, I think, I've heard from too many people about not only the deaths we've seen of pedestrians being hit by vehicles, but also just the near misses or the grievous injuries we've seen. So it's definitely the most important thing we're trying to address, is keep our roads safe for everybody. I think it kind of boils down to two pieces, right? One is infrastructure improvements. So how are we kind of building the roads and the built environment in such a way that makes people slow down, makes people pay more attention to what's going on around them, and really makes it safer for more people to get about. I think the other piece of it is some enforcement components. I've been a big fan of automated traffic enforcement and cameras, and try to see some of their expanded use. I know people have a lot of questions around that, and I take all that really seriously, but I think we are in a good position of trying to marry some of the increased automated enforcement with infrastructure improvements. So if you were to ask me, District 1, we're coming up on it. Pearl Street's a real area where we're seeing lots of speeding cars, near misses around pedestrians trying to cross a pretty busy arterial. And so I think about, well, what if we had a camera somewhere on Pearl Street to slow traffic down? And then if we then took the dollars that the camera generated and invest them in that part of the city, right? So that we take money that maybe the camera's generating from excessive speeds and using that to improve the built environment. So are we looking at more bike lanes, crosswalks, safer pedestrian sidewalk, traffic interactions, planting trees, just lots of different ideas to kind of make that corridor more safe for everyone. And then the idea is we slowly put the camera out of business, right? So we slowly get to the point where the environment is such that people are naturally slowing down. We don't need the camera anymore to try to enforce speed and compliance. I think that's a good model we could use in a lot of different parts of our city, right? Where we look at corridors that are high crash corridors, or we're seeing lots of excessive speeding, and we think about how we can use enforcement to pay for some of those improvements. No, I mean, I think it's a great question to ask. When you look at our peer transit agencies in the state, we are by far the least, have taken the least amount of our authorized sales tax, ability to collect sales tax. So I think it's definitely a conversation we need to have. I would be supportive of increasing the sales tax for Pierce Transit. I mean, mostly because when I talk to my residents, the biggest concern they have is the fact that there isn't enough frequent service or enough, service available for them to really kind of meet the needs they need for their lives, right? So is there enough bus service to get them to work, to school, to where they need to go? And so, raising the sales tax will allow us to be able to pay for some of those things that people really want, along with hiring more bus drivers. I mean, we talked about it a little earlier, but I do think Vision Zero is probably the biggest thing we've got going right now, specifically because, I hear from so many residents just about safety on the roads, right? We're seeing people drive recklessly and dangerously. We're seeing pedestrians put at risk, and everybody really wants to be able to safely get about their neighborhoods. And so I think Vision Zero and actually trying to execute on that, getting the infrastructure improvements we need, is going to be the biggest thing we're working on. Beyond that, I think, just looking at some of our bigger projects, some of the bridges that we have that need to be repaired, some of our roads that are crumbling, as we were pointing out as we're driving in down here on Mildred Street. I think ongoing support and maintenance of our roads and transportation infrastructure is kind of the next big thing that I really want to work on here in the next couple of years. I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I think something think we had talked about a little bit before, right? Is the idea is to have multiple options for people, right? So to have safe, convenient, easy ways for people to get across our city, no matter how they choose to do so. I think the most important thing. I have small children, so I do use my car quite a bit, but I work in the city of Tacoma for both of my jobs, and so I could get away with having a bike and just one car with my family, or riding the bus, and those are the options that are available to me, but they're not available to everyone, right? And so I think as we think about kind of our our transportation system of the future and where we're going to try to go, is like, well, how do we think about how everyone can get around our city and make sure there's options for everybody? I think this is something I think a lot about.